Hi friends. In order to swim, you have to get wet. And pretty basic, right? In order to swim, you have to get wet. I think that was the problem with Herod, the Tetrarch. He was one of the kings during Jesus' day. And really what he was a puppet king of Rome. And he wasn't even really from the line of pure blood Jew in order to be king of the Jews. He was part Edomite. Okay. But more than that, he was a man who we hear in Luke 9, who is trying to figure out who Jesus is. So he asks who he is, and people say, well, some say that he's John, who's been raised from the dead, and others are saying that he's Elijah, and still others are saying that he's one of the ancient prophets who has arisen. And he says, John I beheaded. Who then is this whom I hear such things? And the Luke tells us that he keeps trying to see him. So I want to hone in on those two parts. That Herod, a king, keeps hearing things about who Jesus is and what Jesus does and what he teaches. And he keeps trying to see him. Isn't that you and I? I mean, all of our lives as Christians, we keep hearing about who Jesus is. From our priests, from our youth ministers, from our adult faith formation directors, from our catechists, from our teachers, from our grandmothers, from our parents, from other people, from evangelists, from Bishop Robert Barron or Father Mike Schmidt or any number of other people who are talking about Jesus, okay? From the Bible, of course, right? We keep trying to, and we are hearing about who Jesus is. And what that causes inside of us is a desire to actually see him. And there are people in our lives who talk about having what we've heard encounters with Jesus, where they've actually heard Jesus speak to them in prayer, either to their ears or to their hearts, to their memories, speaking through them to their futures, but they've heard him personally. And we're like, wow, I really would like that. I want that. Or we've run into people who've had encounters with Jesus and they said that they have seen him, meaning they've had experiences of him. They felt him. They felt his love. They've known him as Redeemer. And in these experiences, in these communications that God has with these individuals, they've been deeply affected by that encounter. And they see him now in new and deeper ways. And it really has just made their lives better in every way possible. And we see that. We see that in their joy and in their happiness, and that even when they're going through really, really hard times, they get through it, and they have this strength and this endurance and this perseverance. And we're like, I want that. I don't know about you, but in my priesthood, I've met people like that. And I've wanted that. And so over the years, I'm like, how do I get that? Well, first of all, not the way Herod responds. Okay? So Herod, if you remember, he when he finally does get to see Jesus, what does he do? He does what a lot of us say that we're going to do when we get to heaven. I've got a bunch of questions for Jesus. So Herod, when he finally does get to see Jesus, he asks him questions. That's what he does. And the reason why he asks him questions is because he wants to see if Jesus is going to be a threat to him. Remember, he's the king, but he's really not the rightful king, and all the Jews know it. He's an Edomite, partly. And only truly the rightful king can be of Judah, in the region that he was king of, needs to truly be fully Jewish. So he knows he's a poser. And Jesus poses a threat to his kingdom because he's heard about him that he is being called the King of the Jews. So he's afraid that Jesus is going to radically change his life. He does not want Jesus to be not just the King of the Jews, but to be the King of his life. And again, isn't that you and I in our relationship with God? We've heard all kinds of things about him. We want to see him. We want the encounter that other people are having. We want all the benefits of being in a deep, abiding relationship with Jesus Christ that we see everybody else living. And we're like, man, that would be so good. Life would be so much better, so much fuller, complete, and happy if I had this. I wouldn't have all these problems. And when I have problems, I'd be able to get through them like that guy or that woman. So we want that. We want to see him. But we don't want him to be king. We don't want him to be king of our lives. We don't want him to change our lives because we are afraid in him changing our lives that he's somehow going to diminish our life. He's somehow going to take away the good parts of human living. Rather laugh with the sinners and cry with the saints, the Billy Joel song. There's something to that that's ingrained in our psyche. And we think that life is going to be less. And all that is a lie from the father of lies. Life is going to be better and so much better than with him than without him, being the King and the Lord of our lives. So, Jesus walks into Herod's life. He presents himself, and Herod misses this opportunity to have an encounter with the Son of God and the rightful King, the King of the Kings. God is going to present himself to you and to me many times up and down our lives. That's who he is. I mean, if he can go to a sinner like Herod, right, who did terrible things in his life, a great sinner, he's certainly going to come to you and I who are somehow less sinners. He's going to give us the opportunities to truly see him and to have an encounter with him. So it's not a matter of how can I get what other people are getting as they hear Jesus and as they see Jesus and have experiences with Jesus, and their life is so much better after that. And so are their marriages, and so are their families. I want what this guy has in this marriage or what this woman has in her family life. I want that. You're going to have it. God's going to present himself to you time and time again, just like he did to Herod. But the question is, are you going to let him walk into your life and walk out of your life and never have that encounter that Jesus wanted Herod to have and wanted you to have? When I was a kid, I wanted to learn how to swim. And so I remember distinctly one summer, my mom would drop me off early in the morning at the public pool. And early in the morning is when they did swimming lessons before everybody else showed up. So early in the morning, it is cooler and that water is cold. And there are days, I remember many days, where I did not want to get in that water and learn how to swim because I didn't want to get wet and be cold. But I'll never forget the sign that was on the gate into the pool. And it went something like this. It said, you can't learn how to swim by proxy. In order to learn how to swim, you have to be willing to get wet. You have to jump in. And something in that gave me the courage to do it day in and day out. And then it doesn't stop there. I had to practice and practice and practice and practice and practice. And then over time, I learned how to swim, and then I swam, and then life was so much better in the pool because I could swim and I could actually go into the deep end where all the big kids were. I've never forgotten how to swim, and swimming has been a part of my life, And that's swimming. But I think in there is a metaphor for our lives. Our lives can be like that. How so? Well, we can't stand on the sidelines or in the grass and just be instructed by our instructor about how to swim. We have to jump in. And it's the same in the Christian life. We can't spend our lives always hearing about Jesus and seeing other people live that deep relationship with God. We can't just sit in a pew every Sunday and be told, instructed about who Jesus is and how to live the Christian life. At some point in our lives, we have to realize that being a Christian, you can't become a Christian by proxy, by another person alone. Yes, it was important for me to stand in front of the instructor and for him or her to teach me the principles and the techniques and all that kind of stuff about how to swim. And yes, that's important that we sit in the pew and we learn, or, there's other ways in which we learn. We put on a podcast or a YouTube video and we learn about God and Jesus Christ. But at some point, we have to come to the realization that we just got to jump in. And we have to be willing to get wet, meaning we have to be willing to immerse ourselves in Jesus Christ, to saturate ourselves with Jesus Christ. And then it doesn't stop after that. We have to be willing to practice the Christian life, to exercise the Christian life, to live the Christian life, to live it, practice it, exercise it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Until, guess what? We're swimmers. We're swimming in God. And not just in Him, we're swimming to Him. And we're bringing others along with us. What we've been taught, what we've learned, what we live, what we experience, what we practice, then we pass on to those who don't know how to swim. And guess what? And you don't even have to guess this because you know this. There are millions in our culture today who are drowning. They're drowning. They don't know how to swim. And they don't know how to swim to God. And they're relying upon you and I who know how to swim, who are willing to get wet. And here's the thing too, willing to jump in when we'd rather not jump in. When it's cold, or any number of other excuses that we throw up for not being all in, all Him. Let me end with this. C.S. Lewis, so a lot of us know who C.S. Lewis is, but this prodigious writer and just this fantastic Christian of the 20th century, probably one of the best known and most effective Christian writers of the 20th century. And he talks about, in one of his books, about how before he became a Christian, he was a professor at a prestigious university. It was either Oxford or Cambridge, and I can't remember right now. But I mean, like this incredible mind, right? Okay. So a man who had a lot of answers. And if anyone, he could certainly, if he chose, rip apart the Christian faith, because he was a professor of antiquities. He was a professor of the Middle Ages, and this is when the Christian faith is in all parts of human society. He knew that age well, all right? And still, he had chosen not to be Christian. But then, and he says this, he says, sitting kind of on the margins, on the sidelines for him, he looked at God as an airman, as an airplane pilot looks at a parachute, used only in cases of emergency. And that's the only time that he found himself calling out to God, was in cases of emergency, when his life was going down. He said, though, after he became a Christian and then realized to be a Christian, really, you need to jump in the water and get wet and be on it. And after he started living his life like that, then he no longer looked at God as an airman looks at his parachute, used only in cases of emergency. He looked at Jesus as a friend who walked with him in every aspect of his life and led him and healed him and inspired him and taught him and loved him and forgave him and every dimension of who he was. At some point in our lives, we have to stop using God as a parachute, using him only in cases of emergency. We have to realize that to even take the name Christian, let alone be a Christian, let alone inspire our children and our grandchildren and everybody else to live the Christian life through us, we have to be willing to jump into the water. We can no longer afford to hang on to the idea that to be a Christian is simply to sit in a pew and be instructed. No one learns to swim that way. We have to jump in and be willing to get wet. And man, once we get wet in God, once we get saturated and immerse ourselves with God, then we will stop treating God like Herod treated Jesus Christ. We'll stop seeing him as a threat to our life, and we will allow him to be who he rightfully is, the King of our lives, who leads us and teaches us to lead others. Until next time, friends.